In the year 536, the sun stopped shining properly. Not everywhere at once, not in total darkness, but across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, people recorded the same unsettling phenomenon. The sky dimmed. The sun gave off a pale, weak light. Temperatures dropped. Crops failed. Snow fell in summer. No one understood what was happening. Within a single generation, famine spread, plague followed, and some of the most powerful states on Earth began to fracture. For centuries, historians overlooked this year. Today, many climate scientists and historians believe 536 may have been one of the worst years to be alive in human history. It is the early 6th century. In the Mediterranean, the Eastern Roman Empire, what we call the Byzantine Empire, is ruled by Emperor Justinian I. From his capital at Constantinople, he is attempting something astonishing, reconquering the lost western territories of the old Roman Empire. To the east, the Sasanian Persian Empire stands as Rome's powerful rival. Further east, China is divided between northern and southern dynasties after centuries of political fragmentation. Despite division, Chinese society remains economically sophisticated and deeply literate, with meticulous court historians documenting natural events. Across Mesoamerica, complex societies are rising and falling, including early Maya polities. The world is not isolated. Trade networks stretch from the Mediterranean to India and China. Silver, silk, grain, spices, and ideas move across continents. And then, in 536, something changes. One of the most important accounts comes from the Byzantine historian Procopius, who wrote, "The sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during this whole year." He was not alone. The Roman statesman Cassiodorus described a sun that appeared bluish, with no shadows cast at noon. In Syria, chronicler John of Ephesus recorded that the sun was darkened and that people were greatly troubled. Chinese historical records describe summer frosts and snowfall during warm months. Crops failed. Famine followed. Irish annals later recorded a failure of bread. What makes this extraordinary is not a single dramatic storm or eclipse. Modern scientific analysis of ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica has identified a massive volcanic eruption in early 536. The eruption released enormous quantities of sulfur aerosols into the atmosphere. These particles reflected sunlight back into space. The result was global cooling. Tree ring data shows that 536 and the years that followed were among the coldest of the past 2,000 years in parts of the Northern Hemisphere. This was not myth. It was atmospheric physics. The cooling did not end quickly. In fact, evidence suggests that another large volcanic eruption occurred in 540, compounding the crisis. Temperatures remained depressed for years. In agrarian societies, this was catastrophic. Most people lived near subsistence levels. A few failed harvests could mean starvation. When harvest failures became repeated, widespread famine followed. In the Eastern Roman Empire, Justinian's ambitious military campaigns required enormous financial resources and grain supplies. Armies marching through Italy depended on supply lines already strained by war. Meanwhile, famine weakens immune systems. And in 541, something even more devastating appears. The Plague of Justinian, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, the same pathogen responsible for the Black Death centuries later. The plague first appears in the port city of Pelusium in Egypt and spreads rapidly through Mediterranean trade networks. Constantinople is hit hard. Contemporary accounts describe thousands dying per day at the peak of the outbreak. Modern estimates vary, and historians debate exact mortality figures, but many scholars believe tens of millions may have died across the Mediterranean basin over subsequent waves. The plague did not emerge solely because of the volcanic winter. Disease dynamics are complex, but environmental stress, famine, malnutrition, and disrupted trade likely intensified vulnerability. The empire Justinian was trying to restore suddenly faced demographic collapse. Tax revenues fell, military recruitment weakened, infrastructure maintenance declined. The timing was devastating. China also experienced severe climate anomalies in the mid-6th century. Records from the Northern Wei and subsequent dynasties describe famines, locust plagues, and population displacement. Political instability intensified. While China would eventually reunify under the Sui dynasty later in the century, the period was marked by upheaval and vulnerability. In Central Asia, steppe societies dependent on pasture lands were affected by cooling temperatures, potentially altering migration patterns and power balances. In Mesoamerica, the so-called early classic Maya period shows evidence of political stress in some regions during the mid-6th century, though direct connections to volcanic cooling remain an area of active scholarly debate. Archaeologists caution against simplistic global cause and effect explanations. What is clear is this: the mid-6th century was not a normal period. Multiple independent scientific data sets, ice cores, dendrochronology, sediment analysis, confirm widespread climatic disturbance. Written sources from Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia independently confirm unusual atmospheric conditions. The convergence of evidence is striking. The year 536 did not instantly destroy civilizations. Empires do not vanish overnight. But the combination of climate shock, famine, war, and plague weakened systems that were already stretched. Justinian's reconquest ultimately failed to permanently restore the Western Roman territories. Italy was devastated by prolonged warfare. The Gothic War left cities depopulated and infrastructure ruined. Within decades, new pressures emerged: Slavic migrations into the Balkans, renewed Persian conflict, and eventually the rapid expansion of Islamic polities in the 7th century. Historians are careful not to claim that 536 caused these events. History rarely works that way. But structural weakness matters. When shocks accumulate, resilience diminishes. The Eastern Roman Empire survived, but transformed. It became more regional, more militarized, and more culturally distinct from its Roman past. In Western Europe, urban life contracted further in some regions. Demographic loss can echo for generations. For much of the 20th century, historians focused primarily on political and military narratives. Climate was background, but interdisciplinary research, combining archaeology, climate science, and textual analysis, has changed that. Ice cores preserve microscopic evidence of volcanic sulfur. Tree rings record annual growth stress. These natural archives can be dated with remarkable precision. The mid-6th century now stands out as a major climatic event in late antiquity. Some scholars even describe the period from roughly 536 to the mid-7th century as the Late Antique Little Ice Age. This does not mean civilization collapsed everywhere, but it does mean environmental shocks played a significant role in shaping the trajectory of multiple societies. The sky dimmed, and the ripple effects lasted decades. Why does this matter today? Because 536 reveals something uncomfortable. Complex societies are interconnected and vulnerable. In the 6th century, trade networks linked distant regions. Grain shortages in one area could affect others. Disease traveled along commercial routes. Sound familiar? We often imagine ancient societies as isolated and resilient to environmental change. They were neither. They were sophisticated, globalized within their technological limits, and fragile. The people of 536 had no understanding of atmospheric chemistry. They could not model volcanic aerosols or predict climatic feedback loops. They simply saw the sun grow weak. Today, we understand climate mechanisms scientifically, but complexity still creates vulnerability. The lesson is not apocalyptic. It is structural. Environmental shocks amplify existing political and economic stress. They do not invent weakness, but they expose it. Imagine standing in Constantinople in the summer of 536. The sky looks wrong. The sunlight feels thin. Crops fail in distant provinces. Rumors spread along trade routes. Then famine. Then plague. And slowly, the confidence of an empire begins to erode. No invading army caused it. No revolution began it. It started with particles high in the atmosphere, too small to see, powerful enough to reshape history. For centuries, this year passed quietly in the records. Now we know. Sometimes, history turns not on a battle, but on the dimming of the sun